Gentlemen, welcome to the Black Sea and Balkan Security Forum. My name is Radu TUDOR. I will moderate this panel with great panelists today. We will discuss about frozen peace or fair peace scenarios for ending the war in Ukraine. Our panelists today, I will start with Kiril PETKOV, is a former Prime Minister of Bulgaria. Prime Minister, welcome. Admiral Igor KABANENKO is the former Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine. Thank you for being here. And James CARAFANO, you know, a great analyst, and you know, he's a great specialist to the Heritage Foundation, our friend and our strategic expert for everything that is happening in transatlantic relation. James, thank you for being here. We will debate this difficult subject about peace in Ukraine. We all want to reach this point, but seems that the war is not stopping. Even there are a lot of diplomatic efforts made for peace in Ukraine. And we want to analyze the impact for the present and the near future, and to talk about also the security in the Black Sea region, which is transformed in a war theater by Russia, and also how the European security theater will be transformed if United States will withdraw some troops, and how NATO will be affected. So many things to analyze in this panel. I will give the floor to Prime Minister PETKOV to start this debate. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. It's very good to see all of you here. Many of you, we know each other. First of all, I want to do a little bit of definition. I don't think there is such a thing as frozen peace. I think there is a war pause, but not a frozen peace. In other words, what I believe is that until we reach a fair peace, there will be no real peace. And we saw this in Crimea after 2014, and I don't think we can have the same mistake again. So my first proposition here in my arguments is that we have to go all the way to the fair peace of the borders from 1991, and anything short of that is a pause of war. I was 3 weeks ago in Ukraine on the front line, and I was very proud, by the way, to see one of the generals telling me that in 2022, when there was 10 days left of ammunition in Ukraine on the front line, Bulgaria was there for them. And we literally were there on a very critical point. But what I was very happy to see is that these initial days of the war have changed. What I see now is more self-reliance due to the new technologies that they have. Farther and farther targets can be reached. And so I understand that at this point in time, the two positions are very far apart between Ukraine and Russia. And the idea of immediate fair peace is not at a hand reach. But what I truly believe is that the more advancement there is in the defense technology of Ukraine, the more Europe is very strong in the financial support of Ukraine, and I think that's a key point here, the more Russia would understand that the idea of gaining ground, it becomes less and less possible. The moment they see that they're losing people, and right now the ratio, I believe, is 1 to 8, roughly, if I'm correct, 1 Ukrainian soldier to 8 Russian soldiers. If this continues, I think frozen peace would be the first step. But then I think the next step for Ukraine is, with its increased capabilities of targeting farther down the line, to make Crimea, for example, not as strategic as it used to. If you cannot position your ships and your air base in Crimea because there are drone attacks that can reach you, Crimea starts losing some of its strategic appeal, some of it. And my hope is that as this happens, and as Ukraine, and this is the other key point, continues with its EU accession path, So it actually becomes stronger economically, stronger innovative-wise. Then in the long term, fair peace can be achieved. But fair peace is the only peace we can have. Anything less of that would be a temporary war pause, which I don't think we can repeat again. That's my argument.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The Deputy Minister KABANENKO, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here today. Let me begin my brief speech from perspective of certain principles of war, what are rapidly confirmed by the historical experience. They teach us that a large-scale war cannot be stopped until decisive developments occur on the battlefield. Such is the nature of war. The transition from war to peace cannot be achieved solely by diplomatic means, because something decisive must happen on the battlefield, something capable of changing the political position of the opposing sides. Regarding this, the equation arises as such conditions already created. A couple of days ago, Putin hinted what the war in Ukraine would supposedly end soon, but Moscow shows no signs to stopping hostilities. Russian troops are intensified offensive almost along the entire front line. According to information from sources, the Kremlin is discussing the mobilization of at least 300,000 people. That is, apparently Moscow is currently pinning its hopes on this year's summer offensive campaign, and under favorable conditions, its conduct is going to continue the war in the future. On the other hand, there is a significant shutdown in the Russian troops' advance. At this rate, it will take Moscow at least 10 years to occupy the entire Donbass. Over the past 3 days, Moscow has lost control of more than 113 square kilometers of previously captured territory, and Russia's losses on the battlefield are growing. It's already mentioned by Prime Minister. Ukraine is ahead of Russia in drone strikes. These are becoming increasingly painful for Russia. Does this mean like a turning point? In my opinion, there are certain indicators, but it would be premature to claim what the military conditions for ending the war have already been created, since the intensity of combat shows no signs of diminishing. At the same time, this summer campaign seems to be decisive in many, many respects. The Kremlin does not stop talking about territorial compromises of Ukraine for sake of signing a peace deal. This is really only an ultimatum, Moscow ultimatum. Let me remind what the majority of Ukrainians consider the demand for the withdrawal of our troops from Donbass as a prerequisite for ending the war unacceptable. This means that any attempts to trade Ukrainian territories are doomed to failure due to the opposition of our society, critical opposition of our society to this. Despite this topic was reflected in approaches to security guarantees. The US has expressed its readiness to provide Ukraine with such guarantees, what is currently important. But after our troops, it's critically important, but after our troops' withdrawal from Donbass, not before the ceasefire and the end of the war. This was stated by the President Zelensky in March this year. The US side has denied the existence of such a requirement, but as for now, the topic of security guarantees seems to have been somehow postponed for later. This is quite illogical from my perspective. The very process of actively working out these guarantees and reaching at least initial agreements with partners could deter Moscow from escalation, as well as help to approach the long-awaited peace. At the same time, given our negative experience with the Budapest memorandum, it's well known, security guarantees must be reliable, reinforced concrete, in a sense, as President Zelensky said. This means what formal assurances and even a dedicated military contingent alone are insufficient. Real long-term security of Ukraine and the entire region will depend not only on partners' military capabilities enabling the reliable and effective deterrence of Russia from repeating its aggression, but also on the political willing to employ them if needed, as well as on the effectiveness of the C2 structures responsible for implementing these guarantees in the face of pressure from Moscow. Accelerated NATO membership looks the optimal solution for Ukraine regarding above. However, we do not observe a consensus in the alliance regarding this. Under these current circumstances, a more realistic step appears to be Ukraine's accession to specific security cooperation formats existing in Europe, such as NORDEFCO and others, or joint creation new ones, capable of yielding tangible practical results in the immediate future rather than at some distant horizon. Such sub-regional security coalitions could constitute a substantial contribution to ensuring Ukraine's security, not only in the post-war period, but also for bringing the ongoing war to a close. Thus, taking into account a wide range current circumstances, the logical strategic path toward achieving a ceasefire and establishing peace, however paradoxical it may sound, lies in forceful neutralizing the aggressors' war-waging potential through decisive and effective operational actions. In this paradigm, if this paradigm is accepted, then achieving this objective is possible by stabilizing the situation along the entire front line, while simultaneously exhausting the advisory to such an extent what Moscow is compelled to cease hostilities. The success of such a strategic approach depends on the strength and resilience of our defense across all dimensions: military, political, societal, economic, energy, maritime, and others. Ukraine is taking significant steps in defense and resilience strengthening, demonstrating proactive adaptation to the realities of modern warfare. Taking this opportunity, let me express my sincere gratitude to our partners for critical vital support of Ukrainian defense in other spheres. At the same time, it is evident what our, so to speak, shared success in bringing the war to the end and strengthening European security will be largely determined by targeted and timely military support from partners, as well as by tightening sanctions aimed at limiting the Kremlin sources to wage the war. Therefore, the current security situation that Russia is raising the stakes requires a closer convergence of our Western partners with Ukraine. If it works well, the situation on the battlefield develops favorably for Ukraine, and Russia's drift towards a ceasefire and freeze of the war is possible by the end of this year, from my view. The duration of such peace will depend on how robust security guarantees are, as well as political will to activate them to prevent Russia from repeating aggression. At the same time, such a peace will not be fair, as issues concerning the restoration of Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its 1991 borders, the withdrawal of Russian occupation forces, and the punishment of the aggressor remain unresolved. If there are gaps in Ukraine's urgent defense needs, primarily in air and missile defense, air superiority and deep strikes capabilities, we will likely continue next year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Minister KABANENKO. Now I giving the floor to James CARAFANO to see the Atlantic view of the Russian war in Ukraine, the Black Sea security, and also about NATO posture. Please, James.
Well, first of all, a sincere and deep apology. I'm really sorry. I mean, you went from prime minister to deputy minister to no minister, so I feel like the whole panel's just kind of stepped down. And obviously I can't, speak for the United States or for the transatlantic community, but I'll just give you my personal view, which is I don't know how the war ends, and I don't care. I mean, obviously, of course I care. I mean, we all want the suffering to stop, but I don't think as a community writ large, we can do anything at this point to really know that. So what we can do at this point as a community is work with what we do know, which is that Russia's never going to win this war. There's going to be a free and independent Ukraine that can defend itself. And so I think rather than sitting around and waiting for what the final thing looks like, if there is a final thing, and whether it ends in a treaty or it kind of ends in a whimper, we can focus today, right now, on the things that we know are going to happen and we know we're going to have to do. And I'll say something which might be not everybody agrees with, which is fine. And similarly what I said about the Western Balkans, although for different reasons, which is I don't think we start with the notion of, well, the first thing we have to do is get Ukraine in NATO and the EU. I think that's the wrong way to look at this, in large part because, let's be honest, there are lots of large geopolitics, much larger than Ukraine itself, that are going to determine when and if those things ever happen. And so we could sit around and wait for this to happen, or we could do the things that will actually secure Ukraine in an important and sustainable future. The number one thing starts with actually the thing everybody in Europe needs and will always need, which is reliable, affordable, abundant energy. You cannot have a modern society without it. Absolutely, there's no way we can reconstruct a vibrant and prosperous Ukraine without that. And I will say from the US perspective, I'm actually very proud. The United States has actually started to lay a lot of the groundwork for this. I mean, if you've just followed this, as much as people say that the United States is going to leave NATO, which isn't going to happen, the United States is going to leave Europe, which is never going to happen, the United States doesn't like Europe, which isn't true. I mean, if you look at the last month, the amount of American activity in Southern Europe has been mind-boggling. I mean, the United States has mounted several major data and energy projects, and the interesting thing about all of these is they help lay the foundation for pathways for secure energy security from Ukraine coming from the south, and other potential developments that are going to be helpful. So I think that that work needs to accelerate and continue, and it needs to become the mantra of all Europe. If it's not delivering reliable, secure, and dependable energy, it's not something Europe really needs. The next really comes with this incredible defense arsenal, and you personally have contributed to help building this, which is really unprecedented. I mean, the time we say we need to rebuild the transatlantic arsenal, and particularly in Europe, Ukraine is actually doing this in real time every day, actually delivering some of the most cutting edge capabilities that not just Europe, not just the United States, but literally everybody in the world wants. And obviously that defense cooperation needs to be a priority, it needs to accelerate, it needs to integrate, and the resources that contribute to that defense capability need to accelerate as well. And again, I'm kind of proud of the United States because the United States has already entered into several investments in Ukraine. There'll be increasing US investments and partnership. I think the US will be one of the more prominent partners in the defense and reconstruction in the Ukraine. The third thing is, and there's only two more, so don't worry about it. The third thing is tying Ukraine into this incredible opportunity that we have to build this resilient and prosperous and thriving and energetic backbone of the European economy, going from the north of Europe to the south of Europe, and integrating Ukraine deeply into that. We just had an incredible, well, not us actually, but the 3 Cs initiative for Forum in Dubrovnik, which I think was a success beyond anybody's expectation. I was super pleased to see a massive US footprint there, the most ambitious footprint that we've ever had. But investing in the infrastructure and the energy and digital connections is so important. And Ukraine's already a strategic partner in the 3 Cs, but accelerating that, particularly in the development of the Danube corridor, which would add, I think, just an enormous amount of additional resilience and capability to the integration of Ukraine into that corridor, but also to other neighbors as well. Obviously, the topic of this conference, a free and open Black Sea where commercial traffic can transit the Black Sea with confidence and safety is super important. And the last thing, I know we want security guarantees and we want this and whatever. Actually, I think the easy pathway for here is really, there's nothing limiting Ukraine or any country anywhere in the world from having bilateral security treaties. Nothing. You don't have to wait on NATO, you don't have to wait on the European Union, and let's be honest, from the Russian perspective, it's irrelevant. The difference between having a bilateral security agreement, treaty with another country, to the Russians, that's NATO, it doesn't matter. So, I mean, there's some, I think, incredibly obvious ones, Poland, Baltic states, some Northern European partners, and some others. This is the new game du jour. I mean, we've already seen this accelerate in the Middle East, where we went from implacable enemies to Ukraine having Israel having bilateral security agreement with former entities, sharing defense capabilities, building collective security. That's going to happen. And just my message is, trust me, I love NATO. Nobody loves NATO more than the Heritage Foundation. We were the first to support NATO enlargement. We were the first to call for many states to join. It's awesome. It's great. It'll be there. It's fine. But it's not the only game in town. And if you want to strengthen NATO, the stronger bilateral relationships are, the stronger economic partnerships are, the stronger energy security is. That will give NATO the confidence and resilience it needs to go into the future. So we can sit and talk about membership forever, security guarantees forever, or we can get on with the business of building the Ukraine of the future, which is going to happen. And the more we think about it, and the more we focus on it today, the more it's going to happen regardless of when and how this war ends. Thanks.
James CARAFANO, thank you so much for those ideas. I will provoke Minister KABANENKO. James said something very interesting. Bilateral security agreements. Until Ukraine will reach a peace settlement and maybe a future in NATO, do you think this idea of bilateral security arrangements, it will work? And how do you see probably that will happen? You mentioned also the 1994 Budapest Memorandum, and there are several other countries there giving Ukraine security guarantees.
Thank you very much for this question. From my perspective, it can work, but you know, it's again, I would stress what Russia can be stopped only by force. So to create something before creation of some formats which can support Ukraine security and defense, they should understand, does this format work in this direction? Does this format create, you know, some force behind Ukraine which can just influence, strategically influence on Russia, deter Russia, provide necessary capabilities, additional capabilities for Ukraine if Russia will continue aggression, or after creation of signing of frozen peace agreement, will repeat aggression. So from my perspective, different formats of bilateral, multilateral formats can work. But again and again, we should understand behavior of Russia, strategic behavior, and create capabilities and formats necessary to stop Russian, you know, aggressive ambitions, to defend Ukraine, really defend. Not, you mentioned, not like assurances of the Budapest Memorandum. So to do real things and really support Ukraine in strategic path and strategic perspective, not only on signing documents. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Prime Minister PETKOV, allied security or bilateral security?
So I actually liked many of the points that were made a little bit earlier, and I think I fully agree on the fact that energy security, energy projects, independence, the vertical corridor, we should build more bridges between Bulgaria and Romania for a quick example of NATO mobility. We should get from Alexandroupolis all the way to Ukraine these supply routes that would make long-term strategic strength of Ukraine in a way that Russia would understand. So I fully agree with this part. What on the other side though, I think it's not either or. I think we should not, because we're doing these projects, and I think they're vital and great, we should not decrease our coordinated strategy on the Euro-Atlantic front. Because in the end of the day, China is there, Russia is there, and if we start picking and choosing our battles, sooner or later we'll be weaker. We work coordinatedly on all fronts, so that everybody who is challenging democracy and challenging the whole idea of 21st century, no sphere of influence and all this stuff should understand they have an allied front. So I think it's not an either-or strategy, we should do both. Go full force on the energy sector. I'm very proud that we did the Greek interconnect for 8 months during my time, something that was not done for 10 years. So it's possible. I'm very proud of the US effort, by the way, on the vertical gas corridor. I love to take the market share of Russia into Eastern Europe in terms of gas supply. Great idea. Very proud on the technology innovations that are happening between Ukraine and Europe. I think the stronger Europe becomes militarily, the more its worth would be worth more on the negotiation table. But I don't think we should give up on the unity of strength of NATO, because these guys on the other side understand that if you don't fight together, they can pick and choose. Today is Iran. Imagine if we were all together strong on a single position with Iran, we'll be much stronger than just having separate games. The same thing would be with China, the same thing with Russia. I fully agree here with the Deputy Defense Minister. Russia understands from strength. You either show strength or you're weaker. There is no middle ground. So in that respect, I agree with both of your points, but I don't think it's a game of choosing. It's a game of putting all of our strengths together and playing all these games at the same time.
Can I just agree with both of them and tell them they're both wrong? No, I actually do agree with both of you. So to your point, you're right. I mean, we can play at the multinational, but here's the difference, I think. If you look, for example, you mentioned China. China's interest in bilateral relations was to pick everybody apart. I mean, the 16+1 was not to have a united Europe. It was the Chinese ability to pick and choose who would advance. And so bilateral relations were designed to destroy the EU. Now, I think the US approach is completely different. Bilateral relations are what's going to save NATO and maybe save the European, because it's going to build strength from the bottom up. It's going to build commonality of effort. So I think they're both fine, but I think the playground today, the one that can move the fastest is the bilateral way, and I think will make us stronger. And I do agree with you that you have to look at this from the Russian perspective, and I think the Russians look at the correlation of forces, and that's it. They don't look at treaties and lines. So, you know, I used to tell my good friends in Sweden and Finland, right? It's just easier to just call them Sweden, right? I don't care if you're in NATO, and they were shocked, like, what? You don't care if we're in NATO? I said, look, the Russians don't care if you're in NATO. When they write their war plans, they just assume that Sweden and Finland and Norway are going to fight as a flank, on the flank of NATO. They don't care. My good friends, the Austrians, who for years said, well, we're nice, small, and neutral. You know, we're okay. We're protected. Nobody will bother us. And if you actually look at the Russian war plans during the Cold War, the avenue of advance was right through Austria, right? It's like we're not, you know, they don't. So I do believe that actually any bilateral cooperation or deals and stuff, that is valuable because it shows that Europe is united. And so I do think in the absence of a quick vote on NATO extension, bilateral security agreements will make a huge difference. And I've always said this, the most important country in NATO today is Poland, because it literally is the West Germany of the 21st century. It is the frontier state that you cannot bypass. And Polish commitments, both on liberal and conservative governments, to improve is the savior of this alliance. I really believe that, which is why the United States calls them the model ally. The second most important country in NATO today is Ukraine, because it doesn't matter if Ukraine is in NATO or not. Russia can invade almost nobody and just wave at the Ukrainians and said, oh, no, it's okay. We're heading over to Tallinn. Don't worry about us, right? Ukraine is an unmovable obstacle. And that's why I feel that the accelerated path that we're on, that we're actually seeing happen in real practice, is going to deliver real results. So it's my confidence for Ukraine is through. If Ukraine was a stock, you know, I would buy it. I would put it in my 401k.
Can I just agree and challenge a little bit?
Please add Bulgaria and Romania in these important countries.
No, but it's important. It's important.
Romania is the third most important. Okay.
Thank you.
See, there is even in Europe. Let's not even target and have it as only the U.S. argument. There are people in Europe that saying Europe of the nations, and let's do single country identity type of deals. In my opinion, that's a wrong path for Europe and wrong path for the Euro-Atlantic relationship. Why? Bulgaria, for example, we're 2% of the European GDP. As 2%, what kind of an impact can we make for the Ukrainian war? Nothing. But as part of Europe, we actually could make a big deal out of it because we supplied 5 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine because of the EU coordination support. Romania is the same thing. Even Germany, when we talk about Germany as the strongest engine of Europe, it's 22% of its economy. So China and Russia understand this. They understand very well that they have one advantage, they're a single entity. And if they can split us apart and make deals of the nations, as you said, I fully agree with this, they just win. It's a strategic win for them. So I believe it's totally bullshit, in my opinion, the idea of having separated countries in Europe to play by themselves and try to help, for example, Ukraine. We either play together or we were not considered on the table. I furthermore agree that there should be no free riders. I understand. So the idea of free riders should not be the case. But having no free riders, the more coordinated we are on the Euro-Atlantic relationship, the more serious we are. People look at number of nuclear weapons, people look at GDP, people look at populations. These are the big numbers that actually count in the long term. Thanks.
I'm sorry we have to end this panel here because George Kutaro was here showing me we have only 1 minute. Of course. Please give a round of applause to this panelist. And thank you so much. In 10 minutes, it will be the next panel here, Unlocking the Black Sea Offshore Energy Resources and the Future of European Supply, in 10 minutes here in Regina Maria Hall. Thank you.